And the translation is there in chapter 19, verse 1. Yahweh spoke to Moshe, and he said, "Speak to the whole community of the sons of Israel, and tell them, Ani Yahweh, for I, Yahweh, your Elohim, am holy. Each of you must respect his father and mother, and you must keep my Sabbath. I am Yahweh, your Elohim." And so he begins here. Yahweh spoke to Moses. So Yahweh is the originator of the code of holiness. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, and of course, so many times it says, "Speak to the whole community of Israel, the sons of Israel, and tell them." And so from Yahweh to Moses, from Moses to the sons of Israel, which are the men in the congregation, and the men in the congregation are to teach their wives and children, and of course, the wives and children of the men who are taught by Moses, who are given the word by Yahweh, are to teach the younger women so that everyone is always taught. There is a progression. And the most important thing that is taught here in today's teaching, it says, be holy. Be holy. Be holy. This is a command to be holy. We are commanded, think of it, we are commanded to be holy. Now, we're not commanded to be sinless, impossible. We're not commanded to be perfect, that's impossible. Only Adonai is sinless, only Adonai is perfect. But we're commanded to be holy. We're commanded to be holy. When we stand before Adonai throughout eternity, we will have no sin. We will have nothing of the past. We will have no imperfections. We will not be mortals. We will be immortals. But that's then. That's in our future. But now, we are not perfect. We are not sinless. We're not in our eternal, immortal bodies. But in this time that we are in our mortal bodies, that we are in the flesh, we're called to be holy. We're called to be holy. The word holy in Hebrew, of course, is the word kadosh. Everybody say with me, kadosh. Kadosh means not to be common. The word kadosh means not to be common. Last week I explained it by talking about the holy dishes and the common dishes that we all have. Holy dishes are only those dishes we set apart, we only use at certain times. Common dishes are the ones that we use every day. But Adonai calls us to be uncommon. To be holy means to be uncommon. Don't be common. The world is common. The world is the same. Adam was holy. He was kadosh. But then when he allowed sin in, he brought commonness in. And he became common. And every son of Adam is born common. But Adonai calls us out of commonness. He calls us out of the world. We are not to be like the world. We are in the world. We live in a world. But we are not of that world. And so we shouldn't be living like that world. That world has a common way of doing things. Much of that we're taught from little kids. We're taught to be common people just like everybody else. The school system has done a wonderful job of making everybody common. They've tried to make everybody common, and even now they're trying to make everybody the same, trying to make people more commoner and commoner and commoner. In fact, I read yesterday that there was a school system, and I can't remember the name of the place. I don't know if you saw it in the news, but there's a school system the parents are suing the actual school system because the school system is trying to make the transgender community in elementary schools common. And so the parents are saying, wait a second, we don't want that. And so they're suing the school system because transgenderism is becoming common. All this LGBT, AFLO, 1, 2, 3, whatever, is becoming common. But Adonai says, get away from that. Come out of her, my people. Come out of Babylon. Babylon is common. In fact, the idea of Babylon, interestingly enough, Adam opened the door to commonness and stopped being holy, the one, the special, the actually made of Adonai person. And all of a sudden after him, look at Cain. Became the first person to kill, the first murderer, slitting his brother's throat. And that commonness has continued to this day. In fact, it got so common, violence, Hamas got so common that Adonai destroyed the world, and through Noah and his 3 sons remade it. But right after that, and the world had become into 70 sons of the 3 sons of Noah. Noah had 70 sons and grandsons that became, at that time, and Nimrod stood up and started the commonness again. And from there, commonness has spread through every culture, because every person alive in the world today, every religion, every race, every creed, everything comes from Babel. And as they spread through Babel, it went through the whole known world. That's why Adonai had to choose a man out of Babel by the name of Abraham, and says, Lech lecha, arise, come out for yourself, come out. And Adonai got Abraham, our father, to come out of Babel, to come out of that culture, to come out of the nations that had been formed, and says, I'm going to make you into a new nation. I'm going to give you a seed, so that you could bring salvation to all the tribes of the earth. And that's what Israel is the descendants of Abraham, who was called out of Babel. We've been called out of Babel from the beginning. By the way, when we get baptized, part of the baptism is we inherit what Abraham inherited, and that's coming out of Babel. Once you get baptized in Messiah, whether you're Jew or Gentile, male, female, rich or poor, handsome or ugly, doesn't matter. Once we are baptized, we become the children of Abraham, and we have to follow our father Abraham out of Babel. Leave your country, leave your people, leave your culture, leave everything for a land that I will show you. And that's what Israel is. Israel is a way of life of the holy man. The holy man Abraham called out. And every one of us called out. Every one of us called to be holy. Be holy. What does it say here? Be holy, for I, Yahweh, your Elohim, am holy. In other words, in this area of holiness, he says, be like me. Be like me. I want you to be like me. This is emphatic. Be holy like I am holy. I, Yahweh, your Elohim, am holy. Now remember what he's not saying. He's not saying be perfect. He's not saying be sinless. He's saying be holy. So there is a difference between holiness and sinlessness. And there's two aspects of holiness. Two aspects of holiness. Inward holiness and outward holiness. Inward holiness and outward holiness. Holiness is the fruit of holiness. Holiness is the fruit of holiness. In other words, when Abraham was called out, Adonai called him out of Babel, out of the common way of the Babylonian system, which is still with us today. Called him out of Babel and says, I want you to follow my way. I want you to follow my way and teach your children after you and your household my way, that they might live justly and do right. Adonai called Abraham and says, Abraham kept my Torah, he kept my charge. Adonai said, he kept my mishpatim, my hukim. And by doing those things, by Abraham being a Torah keeper, by Abraham following the mishpatim and the hukim of Adonai, he was an uncommon man. In a common world, Abraham was an uncommon man. Was Abraham perfect? No, he wasn't. Was Abraham sinless? No, he wasn't. We see Abraham in his humanness with sin and imperfection. But he was a holy man. We see this throughout Hebraic culture. David was a holy man. Was David perfect? No, he wasn't. Was he a sinner? Yes, he was. But he was a holy man. He was uncommon. He was not like the world. We're called not to be like the world. Holiness, outward holiness, is the fruit of inward holiness. Outward holiness, how we're holy on the outside, set apart, different, unlike anybody else, is the fruit of inward holiness, being set apart, being set free inside. And by the way, Yahweh is the one that first of all makes us holy. We cannot attain holiness out of ourselves. Holiness is a gift of Adonai that he gives us. But once in your hand, this is how and what holiness is. This book of holiness is given to us. Adonai gave it to us and says, this is my book of holiness. The book of Leviticus brings us the idea of what is holiness? What does a holy man look like? What does a holy woman look like? How do holy people act? Be holy, for I, your Elohim, am holy. Each of you must respect his father and mother. And so now we begin examples of holiness. Examples of holiness. Each of you must respect his father and mother. By the way, don't get into the common idea that, well, I'll respect them if they respect me. Junk. It doesn't say that. See, today we have this idea that, well, I'll respect if they respect me. Well, who are you? We must respect whether we're respected or not. That's Adonai's. Now the world, yeah, the world follows the other way. But your father and mother gave you life. And in respecting them, there might be things you might have to do to show them respect. And there might be situations where you have to show respect. You might not agree with what they say. You might even have to separate yourself from them. But in everything, you must never speak against them. Never speak against your parents. We have Mother's Day tomorrow. We have Father's Day next month. These, by the way, people ask me, well, aren't those pagan? We don't do Father's Day and Mother's Day because they're pagan. Oh, no, Father's Day and Mother's Day are not pagan. Those are not pagan. By the way, there's three neutral, Father's Day, Mother's Day, and Thanksgiving Day, that are neutral celebrations among everybody that is in this country. I think other countries have Father's Day and Mother's Day and Thanksgiving days, and all cultures have those days. Independence days and things like that. Many of these are neutral. Now there's a lot of them that are definitely pagan. Christmas is pagan, Easter's pagan, Valentine's Day is pagan, definitely Halloween is pagan. All those are pagan. And of course we have holy days of Adonai, the 7 feasts of Yahweh. But tomorrow and next month, and by the way, Father's Day falls on Shavuot in this year, 2019, and we are going to have a Shavuot day. That's one of the feasts of Yahweh. That's also a pilgrim feast when all the men show up here at 9 o'clock, and then at 10 o'clock we're going to have a meeting for everybody else, and a Spanish service on Saturday night in honor of Pentecost, in honor of Shavuot. And then I believe we are going to have a picnic at the park here on for Father's Day right afterwards to honor the fathers. We're going to have a barbecue at the park across up the road here. So be putting that in your calendar. And I believe that is June 16th, if I'm June 16th. And so these are ways we could outwardly honor. But we should honor our parents and respect our parents starting from the inward. We must, to be holy, to be not like the world, to be different. An example of that is, how do you treat your parents? A set-apart person, a person that is been baptized, a person that is part of Israel, has nothing against his parents. We forgive. In fact, Yeshua taught us to turn the other cheek, to go the 2nd mile, or the 3rd mile, 4th mile. Forgive as many times as you've been hurt. And that applies for everybody. Well, why don't we apply that to our parents? By the way, it goes on to say next, and you will keep my Sabbath, for I am Yahweh your Elohim. A holy person, a set-apart person, keeps the Sabbath. In other words, if you don't keep the Sabbath, you're not set apart. You're like the world. In fact, Babylon is the originator of Sunday worship. And it infiltrated and got into the Kehillah early on, and now the whole world follows the common day of the sun. We need to be different. In fact, it goes on to say, do not turn to idols, cast no gods of metal. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Notice that in all these things he says, I am Yahweh your Elohim. We must not cast idols. We must not make idols. Definitely bow down to them. Watch what it says in verse 9. Look what holiness is. Look a really good example from the world of holiness, from earth, from how we live in this world. When you gather your harvest in your land, and you are not to harvest to the very end of the field. You are not to gather the gleanings of the harvest. You are neither to strip your vine bare, nor to collect the fruit that has fallen in your vineyard. You must leave that for the poor and the proselyte. I am Yahweh your Elohim. A holy man, a common man doesn't do. A common man is greedy. A common man will look at his field, will look at his trees, and every little piece that he could get on it to make money, to make sure he's full, he'll do it. But an uncommon man, a different man, a called out man, a holy man, a kadosh man, a kadosh woman. When they have a field, say you have a square field. You have a square field and you only harvest oval. You have or round. You have a rectangular field, you harvest oval. If you have a square field, you harvest round. And what you do, the corners, the kanaf, those belong to Adonai. They're not yours. They're not yours. They belong to Adonai. And what belongs to Adonai belongs to the poor, belongs to the proselyte. Those people from other nations that have decided to become part of Israel, they belong to them. And they're free of charge. Anything that falls to the floor are gleanings that you could just come and glean. You're not supposed to pick up. If an apple falls to the ground, you have to leave it there for whoever wants it. I've told the story many times that one time we were on a small little Jeep, and we're going through Israel, and our professor, the archaeologist, tells the driver, stop, stop, stop. And we stop. And he runs across the street, goes into the field, and gets a big stalk of bananas. And he puts it on his shoulder and comes across the road and says, here. And all of us are looking, he just stole that. He stole from that field. Now, we would think of it stealing, but because it had fallen to the ground, it's anybody's, whoever wants it. Can you imagine the way they do things over there? No wonder they're blessed. And so anything that falls to the ground in our harvest, most of us would never consider. In fact, if you've ever been, harvested, or if you ever had fruit trees or whatever, maybe you've never thought of that. Maybe you've made jelly of all the apples you had. But Adonai's different. Adonai thinks different. And he calls us to think different. And that's holiness. Thinking different, thinking unlike the world. The world doesn't think this way. Watch what it says in verse 11. You must not steal or deal deceitfully or fraudulently with your neighbor. You can't steal from your neighbor. If you see something that your neighbor has, you can't just go over there and steal it. Thieves are common people, and they're common everywhere. In fact, one of the brothers just told me that somebody broke into his house. Oh, it bugs me when someone breaks in and takes stuff. Doesn't it make you feel violated and someone stole part of your life? Because whatever you own is part of you. That's why we must not steal. We must be different. We must not deal deceitfully. We must not be deceitful with our brother, with our neighbor. It says, or fraudulently. We must never defraud anybody. You must not swear falsely by my name, profaning the name of your Elohim. I am Yahweh. You must not exploit or rob your neighbor. You must not keep back the laborer's wages until the next morning. Look at that. Common people do this all the time. Common people keep back and oh, I'll pay you. Oh, next week. Oh, hasta mañana. Oh, la semana que viene, I'll have the money for you. And then, no, go on and on and on and on. You must not curse the dumb. And of course, the dumb are the people that can't speak. A dumb person is a person that can't speak. A handicapped person, a person that has the handicap that he can't speak. You must not curse him. And by the way, from this we learn that we should, when someone has a defect, we should not curse them. We should not come against them. We should not treat them. Anyone who does not have certain abilities, we need to treat in a Elohimly manner, nor put an obstacle in a blind man's way. Nor put an obstacle in a blind man's way. Israel interprets this as anyone who's blind or deaf or dumb or any of the senses that we must do things to help them. In fact, some of the laws that we have even here in the United States and in our state that have to do with handicapped people, with people that are blind, that have a handicap, are made to regulate and help them in their situations, so that we don't put an obstacle in their way by putting something that they could trip or fall. So we must do the opposite. Holy people think of these things. Of course, this is outward holiness, by the way. This is still outward holiness. Anybody could do these things. Oh, I keep the Sabbath. Oh, I do. But remember, where should outward holiness come from? Not from pride, not from ego, not from wanting people to, like the Pharisees. In fact, Yeshua really came against the Pharisees because the Pharisees had outward holiness only, but in the inside, he says, you're full of dead men bones. In other words, they didn't have inward holiness, which is the result of faith. Inward holiness is the result of faith. But from the inward, it has to show outward. Now, if we only have the outward, if we only see the rules and regulations, and as long as we pass the bar there, we're okay, something's wrong. And it's not okay with Adonai. You must not be guilty of unjust verdicts. You must neither be partial to the little man, nor overawed by the great. And again, today, the judges in America, the judges in New Mexico, the judges in Albuquerque should be ousted. In every election that I go to, every time it says retain, I say no. I don't retain no judges. We should not retain them. If they want, they should be gotten out and re-gotten. I don't like that. Either vote them in or vote them out. I don't believe in retaining them. Almost everybody puts yes, and all these crooks are retained. Here in Albuquerque, here we had a murder this last week at UNM area, Nob Hill area. The guy who killed him should have been in jail for assaulting a police officer and shooting another man in the stomach. But some crooked judge, if I knew his name or her name, I would mention it. I don't have no problem with that. But some judge here in Albuquerque let him go on technicalities. Our justice system here in Albuquerque, in New Mexico, in America, is crooked. And they're crooks. I would not be surprised if they're getting kickbacks from people. I would not be surprised. But you must not be guilty of unjust verdicts. That was an unjust verdict. That judge unjustly let the guy go. The guy goes, and of course, he's not supposed to have a gun. He's not supposed to have a knife. He's not supposed to have brass knuckles. And he kills someone. You must neither be partial to the little man. Now, the poor man, don't be partial. Just because he's poor, you must treat him exactly alike. Everybody has to be treated justly. You can't be partial and say, oh, pobrecito, we'll let him go. Or awed by the great man. Oh, he's such a great man. Oh, just, we got to let him go. No. A holy man, if we want to be holy, we have to keep the laws. A holy man will keep law, the rule of law. There is a rule of law. And every nation has a rule of law. And a holy man will keep the rule of law. A common man, just like everybody else, will break the laws. Won't care about justice. Won't care about verdicts. You must pass judgment. You must pass judgment on your neighbor according to justice. You must pass judgment on your neighbor according to justice. In other words, Adonai wants every person to be a just judge. Not only the judges in the court system, but every one of us is a judge in a sense. Every one of us must judge according to justice, not according to sympathy, not according to, they've had a lot of bad stuff in their lives. Let's give them a break. You give people breaks, and Adonai says, I don't like that. You must be just. Justice. Yes, there's compassion. Yes, there's mercy. And Adonai, how many of you has Adonai treated with more mercy and compassion than justice? I think every one of us. But how many of you know that Adonai has been just with us? And he will be just. Sometimes we have done things and we have received the consequences. He's a just Elohim. Sometimes he's been merciful and compassionate with us. But when we stand before the bar of Adonai, when we stand before the bema seat of Adonai, it says he's going to give us as our works deserve. So remember, even though we're believers, we're still going to go. The moment we die, the moment we close our eyes in death, for it is appointed for man once to die, then the judgment. So once we die, we're going to stand before Adonai, and he's going to judge every motive, every work, what we've done, how we've perverted justice or been just. That's holiness. He's going to judge our holiness. Now, he's made us holy. He's taken us out of the world. He has saved us. He has redeemed us. We have been recovered. But now that we are recovered, he says, this is the way I want a holy person to be. A separate person, a person just like me. Can you imagine that? Adonai says, I want you to be just like me. This is the way I am. So therefore, I want you to be that way. I am just. Now I want you to be just also. You must not slander. In fact, the word here in the direct Hebrew is you must not be a tale bearer. You must not be a gossiper. You must not gossip against your neighbor. You must not slander your own people. Do not slander. Do not tale bear. Do not gossip. And you must not jeopardize your neighbor's life. You must not jeopardize your neighbor's life. That means every one of us must be our neighbor's keeper. Are you your neighbor's keeper? Do you look at yourself as your neighbor's keeper? We must never jeopardize their life, do anything that their life would ever be in danger. In fact, at another place, we're told that if you build a second story, you have to build a little wall, a little fence around the second story so that nobody falls off. That's holiness. You know, you say, well, those are zoning laws. Can you imagine? Zoning laws come from Torah. We must be careful over our neighbor. I am Yahweh. You must not bear hatred for your brother in your heart. You must not bear hatred. So many times, especially for what people have done to us in the past, there are some people we just hate. We hate these people. These people are obnoxious in our even remembrance of them. Adonai says a holy man doesn't bear hatred. You will not hate your neighbor. Even if they're hateable, do not hate them. Even if they hate you, don't hate them. You must openly, now watch this, you must openly tell him, your neighbor, of his offense. So if your neighbor has offended you, now watch this. If your neighbor has offended you, it is not his responsibility to apologize to you. Wait a second. Wait a second, we say. He has to apologize to me. I won't forgive him until they apologize. You ever heard that one before? See, we're different. We're not like them. We're not like the world. Christianity many times has become just like the world, and they're thinking like the world, Greco-Roman thought. What we need to learn is how to think like a Hebrew. How to think like Abraham, Moses. How to think like David. How to think like Yeshua. How to think like the disciples. How to think Hebraically. How to think biblically. You must openly tell him, your neighbor, of his offense. This way you will not take a sin upon yourself. Because if you don't tell him about his offense and try to straighten the situation up, all of a sudden, a little seed will be planted in your heart, a seed of hatred. And that seed of hatred is going to grow and grow and grow, and that's where murder comes from. That's every murder. Come from seeds that have been planted of hatred, and you know, murderers are hateful people. Murderers are vengeful people. And you could probably go back to some time in their life When they might have been this murderer that just killed, there might have been a time when he was a little boy that he didn't forgive. And a root of bitterness has arisen, and that bitterness has become a tree, and that tree has borne the fruit of murder and homicide. By the way, this is Matthew 18. In Matthew 18, it says, if your brother has offended you, go and tell him. That is where Yeshua got that. Where do you think Yeshua got everything? From Torah. Why? Because he is the living Torah. If someone has offended you, Yeshua says, go and tell him. Go and tell your neighbor his offense. And if he repents, if everything is straightened out, then case closed, never to be brought up again. It's over with. But if he doesn't repent, Yeshua says, take some witnesses, for on the basis of 2 or 3 witnesses, all cases are resolved. Again, quoting Torah, Yeshua. And if he doesn't repent, if he doesn't acknowledge his fault, then it says, bring it before the congregation, before the leadership. And then it says, have a court. And whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loosen on earth will be loosened in heaven. So Adonai gave the leaders of the congregation, the elders, to have court, that if someone doesn't want to repent after the 3rd admonition, they are excommunicated. And Yeshua, this is Yeshua says, then you treat him like a tax collector and an unbeliever. In other words, excommunicate. That, today, congregations don't believe in excommunication. Moses did. Yeshua did. Paul did. And of course, they got that from the law of holiness. This is the way holy people act. You must tell him of his offense. And then, verse 18, you must not exact vengeance, nor must you bear a grudge against the children of your people. Vengeance is mine, saith Yahweh. We must never seek revenge. Seek to have a grudge against the children. Do you have grudges? You know, most of the people that have left here have left because of a grudge. They've left because what they wanted, they didn't get, and they're so mad, and so many people have left, and afterwards, you see them, and they don't want to talk, or they have problems between you and them. Never leave this place or place. If you've left a place and there's been a grudge there, seek to solve it so that when you come here, or if you're here and you have a grudge and you leave, seek to solve it. Because the place you go to, that will infect that place too. You must love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. Have you ever heard that one before? When they asked Yeshua, what is the greatest commandment? Of course, they were thinking of the 10 commandments. What is the greatest commandment? And of course, Yeshua quotes the Shema. The greatest commandment is Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, ve'achavta et Yahweh Elohecha. And you shall love ve'achavta Yahweh Yireh Elohecha. With all your nefesh, with all your soul, with all your heart, with all your might, with all your meodecha in Hebrew. We must love him with everything we have. That's the first and the greatest commandment. By the way, if you follow the first and greatest commandment of loving Elohim, he will be your only Elohim. You will follow the first 4 commandments. You will keep the Sabbath. You will make no. If you follow the greatest commandment, you will do that. And the second one is you must love your neighbor as yourself. On this rest the Torah and the prophets, Yeshua said. Well, what is an example of loving your neighbor as yourself? Respecting your father and mother, not stealing, not killing, not committing adultery, not coveting. The 10 Commandments are divided in 2 sections. One is towards Adonai, and one is towards others, your neighbor. The first 2 and 2nd commandments, the first and second commandment, are following the first part and the second part. A lot of people have this idea, well, I love my neighbor, but then they steal from him. That's not love. Oh, I love Elohim, but they don't keep the Sabbath. That's not love. We must love Yahweh with our whole heart, our soul, our might. And over here it says, and you must love Yahweh, you must love your neighbor as yourself, Ani Yahweh, as yourself. By the way, you cannot love your neighbor, you cannot love Elohim even unless you love yourself. Have you ever had the thought, why should I love myself? I'm unlovable. I'm nobody. You know, most of those come from someone telling you negative stuff, and the world is full of negative stuff. Many of you have been told so much stuff from parents, husbands, wives, others around you. Your drill sergeant, you're a nobody. You are, lower than a skunk or whatever. Maybe someone has told you, I hate you, or you're ugly, or you're funny, or all stuff like that. And so there's a lot of people that are living with self-hatred. There's a lot of people today that are living with no self-love. We must love our neighbor as we love ourselves. As we love ourselves. In other words, every one of us must have a self-love that doesn't come from pride, that doesn't come from arrogance, that doesn't come from anything else, selfishness, but comes from, I love myself because Yahweh first loved me. Can you imagine you were loved by Adonai? In fact, the idea that he created you, that he allowed you to be born. I say this so many times. There's no such thing as illegitimate children. There's only illegitimate parents. You know that? Every person born, no matter who they are, is important, and Adonai allowed that. For some reason, Adonai did not allow a lot to be born. There's some that were conceived but never born. That's in Adonai's secret little place. But every person born is special to Adonai. Every person born is called by Adonai to become part of his kingdom, to leave the world of commonness and become a holy person. And we must have this idea that I love myself. I love myself because Yahweh loved me. He allowed me to be born, and because he allowed me to be born, that means I'm special. Every one of us is special to Adonai. And you could see your specialness in yourself. Everybody could see how special you are. Now, our specialness, of course, must never be turned into selfishness or that the world revolves around me. Always remember this. The world does not revolve around you. The world does not revolve around me. It revolves around Adonai. But the Adonai that the world revolves around, every one of us is specifically special to him. In fact, did you know that every one of us has a special name that only he knows? Only he knows. And one day he's going to write it on a little white stone and give it to you. And that'll be your name between. You're special. You must keep my hukim. It says you must. Watch this. He says, I am Yahweh. You must keep my hukim. What's a hukim? We have mishpatim, are rules, laws, decrees, observances, whatever the King James uses for that word many places. And it's rules, laws that are understandable to the common man. Like don't kill. Hukim are laws, rules, decrees that don't make sense. They don't make sense. But they're rules that he says you must keep. And we follow them because he said, not because we understand them. See, again, we have an idea that I won't do anything unless I understand it. Well, that's not Adonai's way. That's the world's way. You have to understand. See, that's the Greco-Roman way. You have to understand it. In other words, to follow it. Not the Hebrew way. Whether you understand it or not, you have to follow it. Let's give some examples. We're going to come back to the top, but oh man, there's so much. I'm trying to think how much to do. Watch. Let's go down to verse 27. This is a good hukim. You are not to round off your hair at the edges, nor trim the edges of your beard. What does your beard have to do to be with holiness? Think of this. What does that mean that people that are clean shaven, Lester, are not holy? No, they're holy too. But I don't know why that is so. Now, some of us could grow beards. Some of us cannot grow beards. I could only grow a partial beard. Over here, for some reason, when I used to have beard, I used to have to sometimes just do a little black in there. So now it's kind of hard to do gray. But it says that. So because it says that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow that to the best of my ability, even though I might look like a little billy goat. I might look like a little, one of Kendra's little goat thieves. To the best of my ability, I'm going to do that. Even if you could grow one or two hairs, try to follow that to the best of your ability. Yeah, people might laugh or whatever, but I'm going to follow that. And watch what it says over here. In verse 28. You are not to gash your bodies when someone dies. Did you know that when someone died, what people would do is they would gash their bodies just as a way of saying, I'm in mourning. And well, that's the pagan. That's, people do all kinds of things when people die. Watch what the next one says. You are not to tattoo yourselves. That's a hukim. Why? Tattooing was a pagan thing back then. And people would tattoo the names of their gods on their foreheads. And people would do tattoos. And today, tattoo has become not just a fad, but tattooing have become an obsession. And did you know that A lot of times people have told me, I have to have another tattoo. I know what you say. I know what you say. You said no tattoos, but I have this like, I have to have, and then they have to have another one, and then another one. In fact, I had someone some time ago that wanted me how to put, can you put the name of Yahweh on a piece of paper? And I had no problem with that. So I gave, and then all of a sudden they come with a tattoo of Yahweh. Well, from now on, somebody asked me to do the Shema or whatever. People have tattoos of Yeshua, tattoos of the cross, tattoos of verses, tattoos of Yahweh or in Hebrew. I see a lot of people with Hebrew tattoos or Japanese tattoos or Chinese tattoos. The very Elohim who says, do not tattoo yourselves, they have his name tattooed. Duh. Adonai says, don't do that. Why? I don't know why. I know the pagans used to do that, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. In fact, I still remember my grandma when I went into the military. First thing she tells me is, Hito, make sure you never tattoo yourself, because tattoos are from the devil. I remember those things, and I went, and everyone in my squad, they put a tattoo right here. And everyone had that tattoo. If I was to see someone in that tattoo, that's from that group. I didn't. I was the only one that didn't do that. Now, if you have a tattoo, don't worry about it. It's covered by the blood, like our past. That's our past, right? But I would ask you not to show it off, because sometimes people say, oh, I asked Adonai, but then it's showing off their tattoos. It gets me that people with tattoos, I don't know, if I had tattoos, I would be embarrassed to show them, because that would be from my past. So those are some hukims, and of course the Sabbath is there. Watch what it says in verse 31. Do not have recourse to the spirits of the dead or to magicians. They will defile you. This is the occult. A holy man does not involve himself in the occult. And the occult is, and we'll put it in our perspective here, curanderas. Never go to a curandera or a curandero. Never go to a shaman. There's the occult in Native American religion. There is a cult in the religion of Mexico, and the religion of China, in the religions of Africa. In almost every ancient culture has their occult. Calling the dead, looking at this, divination. Adonai says, I am holy. You will not do that. I am holy. And if I'm holy, I want you to be just like me. This is the way holy people act. By the way, as we close, we're talking about outward holiness. Holiness, in outward holiness, is the fruit of inward holy. It's the fruit. A holy, fruity people is because Adonai, they've allowed Adonai to impute holiness, separation. He has separated our spirit, our soul from the world. Therefore, he calls us to separate our body from the world, our senses from the world, our outward from the world. Let's stand. Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to be here today. We pray that your Ruach HaKodesh might even now allow us to go and study and continue learning. There's so much about holiness, Father. So much about being set apart, different. We are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a peculiar people, set apart to sing forth your praises. We have been called to follow you, Father. We've been called to be holy and set apart like you are set apart from the world. You're not like them. They're not like you. I want to be like you, not like them. Yevarechecha Yahweh va'ishmerecha. A'ir Yahweh panav elecha v'chunecha. Asa Yahweh panav elecha. Vayasem lecha. Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you. And especially those that are listening to us through the Torah Unleashed Radio Network, we want to thank you and thank you for the donations that you send us. We have our blessings from you. Thank you all. Shalom, shalom.